Okay, and we're back. And so I want to talk about a different approach to grace. And like I said, as I do the dunes a couple of times, and I now I've lost count, is that I've learned different things about myself. And this time in doing the dunes, this iteration of doing the dunes in my life, I noticed something about myself in terms of grace that I show myself, which is that I don't show myself much grace. I was in a situation where sorry, it was shaking. I was in a situation where I had the opportunity, a business opportunity, and I didn't network in the way that I felt like I should have. And afterwards, when it was over, I kind of thought about it and I just beat myself up. I was so hard on myself. I just really beat myself up about it for a couple of days. And I thought, wow, I really am hard on myself when I feel like I make a mistake. Not in everything. Some mistakes I make, I show myself grace and I let it go. But there's an area that, certain areas that if I make a mistake or do something in a way that I think I could have done a better job, that I beat myself up about it in my mind. I may replay the incident and like, wow, you should have done that, or it would have been better. Maybe it should have turned out better, or it would have turned out better if you had done that. And as we've talked about in different revelations, the past is the past. You can't change it. Only thing you can do is learn from it. Beating yourself up doesn't change anything. And in fact, it prevents your perspective to actually look at it, learn from it, grow, and move forward. The only thing you can do is if you hurt somebody else is to apologize and sincerely make amends and correct your behavior and move forward. In this case, I didn't hurt anyone else. I just felt like I should have done things differently. So I thought, wow, I see this about myself. I didn't, and like I said, I've done the dunes several times. And I've dealt with when I've gotten to the fifth revelation of grace and used it in terms of how I gave grace and showed grace to other people. And this time God showed me how I didn't show grace to myself in certain areas. So I pondered with that and I thought about that for a few days. And I said, you know what? It's time for me to show myself a little grace. Networking, as I've shared with all of you, I think on the commitment revelation, has been, or maybe it was on trust, I can't remember, is kind of a challenging area for me. I'm not much of a networker. I don't have kind of polite conversations, and I'm not somebody who's going to lead with what I do and what I think I can offer. It's not me. I don't like to do that. I like to have real conversations, real connections. And if those things come up, they come up. But there are other times where you're in a situation where it would, behoove you to network. And so I have to get better about that. And I decided to forgive myself and say, hey, show myself a little grace. This is an area that you're not that comfortable in. You will do better next time, and let it go. You saw it. You know that that's not your thing, but you're doing better each and every time. And the next time you will do even better. So I saw that about myself, saw that I need to begin showing myself grace, but I wondered where I'd gotten that from, where, I'd gotten this thing where I kind of beat myself up. So, a few days after that kind of happened, I asked my mom because my printer was out and I was like, hey, can I email you something? And I'd like you to print it out for me and I'll come by and pick it up later. So I came by to pick it up later and she was not there, and I looked all over and it wasn't there. And so I called her and I said, hey, did you print that thing out? And she said, oh my goodness, I forgot. And I said, okay, well, no problem. I'll figure it out. And we got off the phone, and then I did figure it out. I figured out a new way and it worked out. And later on, she called me that evening and she was still feeling so bad about it. Like I said, I have a loving, wonderful mother, and who loves me, but who was beating herself up for something that I had literally, like I said, I was like, oh, okay, mom, no problem. I'll figure it out. And I did figure it out. I had forgotten it about it. But she was still reliving it in her mind. She was still punishing herself for not doing this thing that was important for me in the moment, but that I had made, I worked it out. It was fine. And so I said, oh, that's where I get it from. My mother and I come from a lineage of women who hold themselves to a high standard. And when we fail or we feel like we've made a mistake, we beat ourselves up in our mind about it. And just at that moment, God brought to my memory a thing with my grandmother. Now, my grandmother was the matriarch of our family. Wonderful woman, God-fearing woman, the kind of woman who would wake up at 4:30 in the morning with her cup of coffee in the kitchen, reading the Bible, reading scriptures. She was like the soloist in the choir. And I'm a Gen Xer. So, I grew up in the 70s and I'm from the Midwest. So it was a street where literally everybody knew everybody. All the families knew everybody. My grandmother was very active, prominent in our church. So everybody knew my grandma, and my grandma's name is Esther Anderson. She's passed away, but like I said, everybody knew Esther and loved Esther. But as I grew older, and because, when you're younger, you see, your grandmother or your person, she was just kind of like this queen to me and still is. But as I grew older, I noticed that when grandma made a mistake, that she would beat herself up about it. And she was somebody who would beat herself up verbally. And I remember one time sitting at a table with her and she made a mistake. And I was at that time in my late teens. And she began to verbally kind of chastise herself for the mistake she made. And I was like, Grandma, don't say that. That's not true. Don't say that about yourself. But God brought that to my memory. And he showed me, you come from a lineage of women who, like I said, hold ourselves to a certain standard. And if we fall short in any way in our minds, we replay it and beat ourselves up about it. And so I hated to see my grandmother do that, because my grandmother was a woman who was loving. Everybody knew her in the community. In our family, it was the house that everybody came to. She was the grandma that everybody dropped all their kids off to and said, Esther, can you help me? There was nobody who she didn't help and didn't love on. She was also very strict, very fierce. She she was just a born leader. She didn't see that in herself because she was hard on herself. But I saw it. I saw it growing up, and other people saw it around her. But seeing that in her, seeing that in my mother, and seeing that in myself, I knew that it was time to stop the cycle. Now, this is not something that's going to happen overnight, but it's something that definitely needs to happen, because beating myself up, you beating yourself up, if this story in any way sounds familiar to you, and it's something you do for yourself. And I'm glad that God showed this about me, because I know that that I'm not alone, that as we share our stories and share our truth, it resonates with you. There's somebody out there who says, yes, I beat myself up too. Maybe not in the same way you do, Aaron, but I do. And so I want you to look at that as you read this fifth revelation. Look at the ways that you punish yourself and make a mistake punitive when it doesn't have to be. It's a mistake. You made it. See where you can learn from it. Apologize if you need to whoever you need to, and move on. You cannot change the past. It will not change. It's going to be what it was. In that situation, I did not network the way I thought that I should. But as a Christian, I know that God's covered it. He's got me. He's growing me. He's showing me how to be all that I need to be. And even if I needed to see that about myself so I could share that testimony with you today, so that you could see it in yourself and make the changes that you need to make, it was all worth it. Because I know that about this course, that there are some things that I'm going to go through just because I'm supposed to tell you about them, so you can see it in yourself or see it in your surroundings and make the change and show yourself some grace and say, hey, this was a mistake, but it's not a life sentence. I made it. I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to move on, and stop replaying the tapes in your mind over and over again. What if I had done this? Maybe I should have done this. You didn't do that, and you definitely do that, and you can't. You cannot go back. The past is gone. It's in your rear view. We're in the present, and the present is now, and you are all that you need to be now. You learn from that mistake, and the next time you're presented with that same scenario, you're going to do it different. And if you're never presented with that, then you didn't really need it, because you're going to go on and something new will come. So believe that about yourself. Believe that about God. Believe that about life. Believe and know that everything you're learning, everything that you're being equipped with in this course is growing you to the place to receive what's coming for you. And so if you need to begin to show yourself some grace and forgive yourself in areas that you had not forgiven yourself in the past, that it's time to do that. And I'm sure you went over that in forgiveness, but let's really go over it now and give yourself some grace. You are worth it. You deserve it. Just like I talked about in the last tape, that we need to show other people grace. And we do. We really do. Because everybody makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect. Everybody was something or a form or something. You used to do something. You made some mistake about something. Holding up those mistakes to those people who made those mistakes and saying, look at you, is not benefiting anybody. Just like when you do it in your own mind to yourself. Let's make the commitment to be better. And when those thoughts come up, let's say, no, tear them down. You don't get to do that. You don't get to have this much of my brain space. I made a mistake. I apologize to the person. It is over now. And don't let other people keep punishing you for something you apologized for and that you're trying to do better at. What else can you do? Nothing except for be better and do better. And if you are earnestly trying to do that, and I mean it, because we went over forgiveness. Forgiveness is not, I'm sorry. No, forgiveness is recognizing how you hurt somebody, truly turning away from that behavior and making a concerted effort to be better. That's forgiveness. We're on grace now, but I just felt led to say that. So show yourself some grace. And I also want to talk about the difference between an incident and a pattern of behavior, because some of you are showing, or you think you're showing people grace, and they actually have a pattern of behavior. And so you're not showing them grace. If you keep letting somebody get away with something, you're actually being taken advantage of. And so I just want to talk about that briefly, because I don't want you to mistake grace with somebody taking advantage of you. So let's talk about an incident. An incident is something that happens, that people do. We make mistakes, we all do, and we show grace. A pattern of behavior is something where you need to create boundaries and say, hey, you've been doing this over and over and over again. You are taking advantage of me, and I need to put a boundary here and not allow you in this space, and not allow you to do these things anymore until you are a different person, or maybe never again. I don't know. I'm going to trust that you can make those mature decisions for your own life, because there is a difference between being humble, which we all need to be. We all need to humble ourselves and give somebody grace. But there's a difference between being humble and being humiliated. Being humble means to remove arrogance and ego. Being humiliated means when somebody challenges, or they disrespect you, and you suffer a loss of dignity. And that's different. So I made a decision a long time ago that there was a certain way you were going to address me. There's a certain way you're going to treat me, because I knew that I was going to address people and treat people with a certain amount of respect for their humanity. So I was going to expect the same in return. So even when I talk about agreements and disagreements, whether they be political or whatever, we can disagree, but we must respect each other in that disagreement. I must respect your humanity. You must respect mine. Because if you don't, then it's a wrap. We're done here. So that's not grace. If somebody's disrespecting me, I'm not going to then show you grace and continue to allow you to disrespect me, because that's humiliation. And I won't allow you to humiliate or disrespect my humanity. But if we disagree, then I'm going to, and you haven't been disrespectful, you just see a thing differently, then I'm going to show you grace, because okay, you've lived your life and you have the right to see it the way you see it. You have the right to live your life the way it best suits you. So I'm going to show grace in that, because I can't determine how you should live, or how you should view the world, or how you should vote, or what you should love or like. So I show grace and extend grace and hope you extend grace in return. But when somebody disrespects you, then that's a completely different thing. So I just wanted to make that clear. So let me give you some examples. Grace is about giving somebody the benefit of the doubt, about showing kindness and care. It's not about letting someone misuse or abuse you in any way. So I show grace when I disagree with someone and I still respect their right to see a situation differently than I do. I show grace when someone makes a mistake and they earnestly apologize and I forgive in kind. That's grace. I show grace when I know that someone I love and respect is having a bad day, and they maybe say or do something that hurts my feelings or that I don't appreciate. And I decide in that moment, you know what, they're having a bad day. Let me show some grace. Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be, because it's an incident and not a pattern of behavior or lifestyle. If it's a pattern of behavior or lifestyle, then you need to address that and hold that person accountable and create boundaries where you feel like you need to create boundaries. But if somebody who's just having a bad day and they were short with you and that kind of hurt your feelings, don't punish them over and over again, because you know it was a moment, it's an incident, they're having a bad day. Show some grace. Because we all know that there are going to be times and incidents in life where friends and family disappoint us and do something that we think, you know, may have been hurtful or not how we would have handled the situation, but they're sorry. Or, you know, it's even okay to say, hey, the way you handled that kind of hurt my feelings, but I know that that wasn't your intention. Let's let it go and get past this and move on. So that's what grace is. When you recognize that somebody is not twisting their whiskers at the house out to get you, you know what I mean? They made a mistake and it wasn't their intention. So show a little grace, let it go, keep it moving. And of course, I already said boundaries is a pattern of behavior that someone keeps doing and they are not apologizing. They don't seem to care about your feelings and they're just kind of steamrolling through life. That's not okay. That's not a situation of grace. That's a situation of boundaries, and you protecting yourself in this case, showing yourself a little grace and saying, I'm not going to allow this behavior to continue because it's disrespectful towards me and I need to create some boundaries for it. So that's boundaries. We've talked about grace. I'm looking forward to you reading the fifth revelation. You should still be doing the fourth revelation, your trust affirmations. As you know, next week we will get into your new affirmations. You should still be doing your mirror work and your affirmations on trust. But this week you are starting the fifth revelation. You're getting into that. You're reading the commentary, you're reading the allegory, the commentary, you're answering those journal questions, and then you are going to stop there. So I hope that as you read and as you walk out in this week, that you show yourself some grace, that you show other people grace. And you see, I wore my love earrings. I don't know how many of you saw that. I did that to remind myself and you to show love, show grace. It's what the world needs now. Oh, and then I thought of the other thing, of that famous Michael Jackson lyric from the Man in the Mirror song. I love that, but I think it's so apropos. I'm looking at the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. And no message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make the change. So let's make the change where we can make the change and show other people grace. All right, that's our lesson for today, and I will see you next time. Bye.